screen is visible to you guys?
Yes, Amit.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay, so in the last session, what we did is we tried understanding multiple concept of how a service ideally work. We took an example and we tried creating certain artifact which are still currently local. We haven't deployed them, but the idea was to understand the building block of a application. Okay, so what we started with is we understood that if we want to create a endpoint or a service onto a system, what we might end up doing is we might have to go with some sort of a service creation. As we are using CAP, we are going with a flavor of CAP plus Node.js. So we took some problem statement. We thought of let's just say create some service out of which we should be able to get the idea how the CAP framework works. We thought of creating certain tables, creating a service out of which we expose certain entity. Once after doing that, we uh, try to expose that particular service in the flavor of a V2 and V4. Thereby, we were trying to understand how the services can be exposed in different flavor, plus how different open source Node.js packages can also be introduced in my project as a dependency. That was the main idea. We also understood how a draft handling can also be enabled, how the CAP model works. That was the main idea we would like to get from that. Um, while doing that, we use BAS, our Business Application Studio, as a development space. We understood that when we are going with any sort of a development which needs a database, we have to provide a database by some means, right? So earlier, what used to happen is the database used to be a bit of a monolith. Okay, it means the things used to be part of my single environment. For example, runtime environment over here called Cloud Foundry. It used to have a dev space, and this particular dev space used to have a SAP HANA Cloud database, which makes it centrally only available for my Cloud Foundry. Tomorrow, let's just say if my runtime is changing or certain more things are changing, I may not be able to use that data which I would have posted or which my user would have posted or which would be still in a use um, by any other runtime environment. And that's the reason this multi-environment edition of SAP HANA Cloud Central started coming into picture. It asks us to create the HANA database in a way that it can be made centrally available. So maybe in the earlier maybe recordings or earlier sessions, or let's just say in the SAP's past video as well, if you would have seen, they were focusing on creating an instance for this. Rather, now we are focusing more on to creating a HANA Cloud instance. That's something we created by going into Service Marketplace and created an instance of it by saying SAP HANA Cloud. Okay, and here we created an instance for it, and we were able to see it into the instance subscription with a category, or I can say plan called tools, because it's going to behave as a tool when we are going to manage our, let's just say, HANA database. When we click on this, or maybe when we click on go to application, we were able to also open a HANA Cloud Central, whose purpose is to centrally manage my all the databases. As we can see, we have this database. SAP ideally try to shut down this database maybe in event of a certain larger inactivity onto that particular database, maybe 20 or 24 hours or so. So anytime when you start working on this, at least onto the trial account, because in the real account system, SAP won't do that. But in the trial account, if you are doing that, if you are using your database, ensure before you start with anything, you just go over here, ensure the status is running. If it is not, click on this triple dot and click on a start. So currently you don't see a start, instead you see a stop button. But if the database has stopped, you will see a button called start. So you can just start the database again, so that can be connected from anywhere. Okay. Uh, into the CAP world, what we understood is whatever we would like to develop, ideally we develop it by means of a certain file called whose extension ideally ends with .cds. So we are able to see certain files whose extension is .cds, we created a namespace so that we can see the underlying database artifact being created with the initial name as this. We also understood that there are certain concept called aspects. Now these aspects are nothing but certain reusable thing, reusable code blocks like we used to have include structures in ABAP, which can be plugged over here so that if you would like to have certain columns reusable, I would like it to be there in different, or I can say multiple entities, multiple tables. I can simply plug those by the means of aspects, which are ideally added with a colon plus the name of the aspect. So here we see that even though we have specified 3 columns, this particular table and the entity will finally have 3 plus 1 over here and 4 over here, which makes it around 8 columns. And that's something we just found when we tried building our particular application. So when we just went over here, we just found the GenDB SRC generated component called EMP APP employee. So EMP APP employee, this is the one has created its column table during the build EMP APP employee, and the properties over here are the one which we define plus the one which has been carried forward, or I can say considered from the underlying aspects. Same we did for the department as well. We expose the things as a services, so we see the things getting generated as a service over here. In order for us to have the draft capability enabled, we also understood that there are certain powerful thing into CDS with so-called annotations, right? So anything that starts with @ is called annotation. I can have a property level annotation as well, which ideally, let's just say, in give some semantic, give some information on my property level, or I can say uh, properties over here can also be enriched afterward onto the service layer. When you go over here, you can simply say annotate service and the relevant entity. You can say with, whenever you specify with, you will go with a round bracket. You will say @ round bracket, and within this you will specify all the UI annotation which are required for designing. On top of it, if you are willing to specify anything onto the property, for example, I would like to specify a label, I would like to specify some tooltip, I would like to specify some value helps, anything which are relevant to those properties you would like to specify, you will ideally go with another block which is within the curly bracket over here. So there is a convention, there is a signature you can ideally follow. um, in order for us to have the things over here which you can view from here, you can you should, I mean, you can ideally do it into this one as well. Or if you would like to break it down like we have in metadata extension into ABAP based CDS views, you can also cut this thing and paste, create another file called anything.cds, annotations.cds, enrichment.cds, anything you would like with the extension called CDS. Then you can paste it over here to say service definition is over here, but the, I can say, the behavioral part, or I can say annotation part, is into the separate file. Okay. Now, after doing that, what we understood is that if you want to connect to my Cloud Foundry, we were going with a, let's just say CF login. We were able to log into my Cloud Foundry. We have our HANA database running. Now we were saying that once we have all this thing, we should be able to connect to my HANA DB. In order for us to connect to my HANA DB, we added certain dependencies. We added a command called cds add HANA, which added a requires for DB HANA. We also installed certain HANA packages, HDB, plus we tried installing a HANA. Okay, let's see if we do not have a HANA client, maybe we can also go with that. Terminal. Okay, let's just say cd. We'll just say @SAP HANA client. Okay, so we are also able to see the HANA client over here. If we just try going to some runtime configuration over here. So the purpose of runtime configuration over here is to help you run the project. Okay. When you run the project, as we say, we are now onto the HANA database. As you can see over here, we should be able to connect to my HANA DB over here. So I can just click on create configuration over here, and maybe you can choose the project that you are working on. I'll just say BTP BEMP. It will give a normal run config name, a temporary generated run config name. As you can see, there is a DB HANA. Okay, that's something that it's generated, and it says, would you like to connect to that HANA DB? I can say yes, bind this. But as you can see, the moment you do that, it tries to connect to your Cloud Foundry. So I'll just close this. Rather, I'll just simply say, please help me log into my CF, because it just logged me out of that. So I'll just simply say single sign on, or maybe let's just simply go with CF login as well. That's something which is also possible. It looks for an API endpoint. So the moment you try to connect with your HANA DB, you have to specify which particular Cloud Foundry you would like to do that. Okay. So you have to specify API endpoint, and where you can find the API endpoint of it. As you can see in this Cloud Foundry runtime, you have this. I'll just copy this and I'll paste it over here. Okay, yeah, I'll say paste. It will ask me for the mail ID. Okay, and I'll specify password. Oh, what did just happen? I hope I'm specifying the right mail ID. Hmm, yeah, it is. Let me just, okay, let's just do it in a different way. Okay. So let's just say okay, I'll go with bit different route this time. I might,
Sumit,
yeah, please.
Sumit, I'm really sorry to disturb. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
no
why
worries,
this
please.
error is coming?
Because I would have entered a wrong password. There is a typo. So
No,
whenever you,
mhm.
please, please.
I have also tried, but it is showing like I was giving right password, but
Mm-hmm.
it was showing the same error.
Is
So
it
I log in
okay?
through the different SSO, then it
Yeah,
generate
yeah.
one ID.
So that's the fact. As in, look, there are two ways ideally of logging in. So when you ideally go with a normal CF login, it asks you for API endpoint plus user ID and password, and ideally that works. I haven't seen any time it failing. For example, I'm adding a password over here. At least till yesterday, it was working. There are two ways ideally of doing that. So here my password, if that works, it means I am passing a right password. Mm, yeah, I am. Okay, then single sign-on is the way out. But it means that recently there are some advancement or something which they are doing, which is restricting us from, let's just say, going through the logging in via the user ID and password, because that's how I ideally used to do. I ideally used to, what it just, okay, it just also trying me to, let's just go via this route. I earlier it used to follow the user ID and password and the single sign on both the approach. You are saying CF login dash dash, I can say hyphen hyphen SSO. The moment you do that, it generates a
Yes, yes, yes,
passcode. You can copy paste, and I guess that's the second
yes,
route. Or I
yes,
can
yes,
say
yes,
that's
yes.
a fallback option we anyway do have, where you are not, as you have already a running session, system won't prompt you for password. Instead, it will generate a OTP kind of a thing. That's possible, but how come they are not considering the password? Maybe it could be the case. There is one more thing maybe you should be knowing when you go with a BTP. When you are into a trial account, there is a playground for us developer plus the beta features as well. So any kind of beta features, any kind of advancement, anything that they are trying out from the SAP's perspective as well, they'll ideally try out those things into BTP trial account. So it could be the case that there are certain things which are being tried out which would have made these things fail. Quite possible. Because I remember maybe I guess still yesterday or maybe the day before yesterday on around Friday, I tried logging in and maybe I was able to log in with the user ID password. Maybe we ideally do that. Okay, let's see. We'll check that out. Not worry on that. It says unauthorized invalid grant. Ideally, invalid grant ideally suggests that you are uh, not getting a passcode in return. So when you ideally go with a default identity provider, it generates a passcode. Now that same passcode ideally gets generated if you go by user ID and password as well, because it's a different, it's a kind of a, this is a basic way of authentication. Uh, let's see. Okay, let's see. I'll just simply go over here, try this out. Let me just close this, let this be open, and I'll just copy this time. Yeah, that's the same thing. Maybe there is some issue why they are not allowing us doing that. But yeah, then maybe we have to go with CF login SSO. Maybe there are some beta feature experiment thing which is going on. Maybe we can go with a single sign-on, generate a passcode, and maybe yeah, that should be all. So that's something which I was planning to try out next, but that's a fallback option.
Oh, so Sumit, this error is only for like trial account or like purchase also.
No, no, no. In purchase, you can follow both. Many a time,
Mhm.
why is it? Hmm. It seems this coming maybe I guess recently, maybe in a day or two. It says you have. It's trying to log in with a UAA. It's not okay. Let's see what are the advancement. Have they introduced any new role? One sec, okay. No, I have the required roles. In normal account, this is not ideally happen. I mean, you won't see this error happening, or even in this trial account as well. You might not have observed this error earlier. If you observed any of the other, let's just say if you try
Yeah,
going in any of the past activity which you would have done, you would also see that the user ID password plus the SSO was working. SSO ideally takes the login session from here. It never ideally suggests you to, okay, let's just go with this.
yeah, Sumit. So
Just-
on that time I was getting error, so I copy and paste in Google. Okay, so
And
it
they
like
suggested
so
the,
like not
yeah, so and,
SSO. So there, I think globally I have created one ID and password. So from
mm-hmm,
that password, I am able to like CF login.
mm-hmm.
For login,
So,
this is the ID. Okay,
right,
whatever you are giving. But
the
for
SF,
CF login, it will be different one.
okay,
So
what was the way that suggested that
uh,
to create
uh
the ID?
yeah, if you copy that error in Google, no, so it will show. I think.
Uh-huh. So what was that the recent advancement? Because till at least I remember in till last week, whenever you create an account, it was picking the same user ID and password, and those are the things those we used to use. It could be the case that maybe okay, let's see. That's a new thing. Okay, nice. Someone waiting. Just a guys, just a minute. Mhm. Okay, let's just do this. There are another way called if I go and run configuration right over here, I can still go ahead and connect it from here as well, right? I hope it will allow me. Yeah, correct. So if I say here, I think it should. Okay. Yeah, here as well they are following the same option. Okay, so they have changed the way the password ideally gets generated for CF. So have they protected a CF more? That's what it seems. Okay, yeah, you are right then. Okay, let's just go with this. Maybe we'll just password locked. Okay, they have locked the password this time. Mhm. Okay, nice.
Yeah, this is this one. Like here,
Mhm.
I have created like ID and password, and from that password, I am able to like log.
How come they are changing this thing? Okay, nice. So it's on the account detail. Okay, the legacy password. Solve the issue by having all the legacy password for the same sync. Where are they asking us to navigate? Account.sap manage account, reset account password. So, okay, so won't it reset? Okay, one sec. This is the one, right?
Yeah, right. So here we need to change like every yeah
Hmm.
new password and
Distinct.
repeat.
Let's see if that works. Wow, this is something new, and maybe it has been
Yeah.
recently introduced from where, I guess. So few people started experiencing it earlier. As you can see, it's December, but
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
never faced this earlier. Nice. But okay. Thanks, man. Thanks for letting me know. This was helpful. Okay. So yeah, so the idea is maybe I just change this user ID password, maybe via that reset account, maybe that we can just have it as a one of the additional activity maybe we can perform to ensure maybe our
Uh,
passwords are not
yeah.
giving any problem. But I use the same password to be really frank. So to have the things in streamline. Okay.
So
Yeah.
Sumit,
So
this password is only for connecting CF login, I think.
no, but
If you log,
point is SAP ideally believes in single sign-on. So for example, I'll just give you an idea. So here I have a BTP. CF is one run environment. For the time, if I just go with another, tomorrow, let's just say I'm creating two applications which are belonging to two different runtime environments deployed version, right? If two application wants to communicate to each other, then there will be a trouble, right? Going forward. So
right,
it could be the case that that particular password or let's just say authority would have been let maybe they are trying to connect it with some SAP Universal ID account because as you can see this SAP Universal ID just got real or maybe just was applied to all the logins recently. Before that, it was not
So,
mandatory. So for the all the new account, you will see SAP Universal ID. But if you have an old account, your account will still not route through SAP Universal ID. You will be able to log in without Universal ID login. Correct.
so Sumit, what is SID and PID?
So S is kind of a super user. So what happens is whenever I am saying I am a SAP's user, currently your PID is a kind of a ID which you behave as a temporary user. I can say a developer. Yeah, I can say. When you have a super user access, you can download the SAP's product, all the SAP nodes and everything you will be able to open. But if you don't have S user ID, you will have only limited access to that account.sap offering which it is providing. It includes downloading any SAP products, raising any SAP nodes, or viewing any OSS which has already been raised, all those things. So SAP ideally sells the license in two different areas. P is so whenever an organization purchase the license, they ideally purchase S user ID for their main admin or key stakeholders. For the other, they can still go ahead and go with a P one, because when they are going with a S user, they get the required access. So from an organization perspective, those are the guys who will be doing the communication. Okay. So I think in your organization as well, you will have a limited S users assigned because they would have purchased limited S users, but rest will be P users. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now as we have login into Cloud Foundry, now the idea is if you would like to connect to a HANA DB instance, I'll click on this bind. Okay, but as you can see, it says no service instance found. Right. If the system would like to connect to your service instance, they have to go with this particular binding. They should be able to connect to some live running DB instance. That's one. So the solution to this is quite straightforward. You can simply go ahead and let's just say create a HANA DB instance for that. That's one. So for example, what you can do is it looks for some HANA DB instance, right? And your HANA DB instance is nothing but some container onto which your data, your tables can be deployed. Okay. So I'll just simply say I would like to go with some sort of a HDI containers, right? So as you can see, it says there is a SAP HANA schema and HDI containers. That's something I would like to connect to. Okay. So you can see that there is a particular container I would like to connect to. You can just simply say, I would like to create an instance of it. It will say that what you are trying to do is create a shared connection which can be used across multiple services which are being deployed at this point in time onto the Cloud Foundry. Okay. So I'll just say HDI, HDB instance, for example, you can name it anything. I'm just saying HANA database instance. So that's the reason I'm saying HDI. I'll just say next and I'll just simply create this. Let's see the view. Let's view the instance. Okay, so the creation is in progress. In some time it should pass. Once this instance has passed the creation, you should also see that this particular instance over here that was showing that, okay, there are no instances which I can connect to. It should start showing this instance which has been created this time. So the idea is you should be able to connect to a live running instance. Now, what is the purpose of this? So just keep the things in mind that these are run configuration. We are only doing this thing to ensure I can say to just try out the HANA DB connection via local BAS. We can skip these steps as well. What we can do in that particular case is you can simply go ahead and prepare the application for deployment and you can go ahead and deploy this. At that point in time, it's also going to create its one instance which is going to run. Okay, so that's also something which you can do. But the thing, or I can say the step we are trying out over here is to ensure that locally, if I would like to try out my application, I'm able to do that. That's the main idea over here. So let's see, the instance seems to be created. I'll just click on this and let's just try to bind this instance again. As you can see, it just started showing the HDI DB instance I created. I'll click on this. It creates some runtime environment file. Okay, again, let's just do that. Okay, maybe now the task creation has started. Yeah, would you like to deploy your DB over here? You can just simply say yes. Your system ideally creates some service key so that your services are identified, and on that particular service, what it did. So it created a container. Now, what is a container? Let's just understand that concept as well. And let's just also see that while generating that particular instance for your application, system generated certain thing. Okay. So for example, I'll just go over here and we'll say that whenever I am saying I have a CAP project. Okay. And in this particular CAP project, when you have a database, so each of the CAP project will have a database associated. Now there are chances that this database can contain tables or it just contains some connection to other database. Could be possible. Okay. It may or may not have its native table. But for this CAP projects to serve its services, to serve the services, it will need an underlying DB. And this DB is ideally called HDI container. There is nothing but a HANA database instance container, which contains all the database relevant object. Okay, it contains some sort of a schema. Schema is nothing but a hood under which all your objects will be clubbed. It can have your tables, it can have your views, it can have, let's just say, if you are creating certain procedures, stored procedures or something. Um, okay, anything that you create as a function, anything that you connect from a remote DB. For example, if you are having two different projects, one CAP project over here, which is having a product master data, another CAP project is there, which is containing, let's just say, plant master data. Now you would like to get the information of this plant into product. Okay, so what you will do is you will connect that particular CAP project over here with the one which exists over here by the means of synonym. So synonym is nothing but connecting uh, components, or I can say other DB artifact into the one under creation. This is ideally done by the means of synonym, and there can be n number of other components within the schema. Anything and everything that CAP contains, all the things will be deployed in the form of a container. Now, how the system know what all thing it has to be, it has to deploy? So for that, you see these files are getting generated internally. This run configuration will deploy, will build your project, and during this particular point in time, it will say that particular project will need a EMP APP department table over here. Plus, it has got the draft capability, so it will create certain views relevant to draft. Plus, it will also need certain draft table to store the draft data. Okay, all these things are going to get generated over here, which ultimately gives the capability to the container so that it can store all those data. Okay, and that's the reason we ideally created this container. And now maybe if you would like, what you can also do is you can simply go in this run configuration and run this project as well. It will try to run your project into a kind of a debug mode as well. So we are going to go in detail when we go into the debug session, how the things can be debugged, how we can identify that, how the things are going to work. But in the debug mode, system will ideally open your project when you run it in the run configuration. If you have any Node.js project or something, you can debug those as well. You can try out how the things work in debugging mode. Okay, so that's the main advantage of having a run configuration. A run configuration to be set up, it needs a running HDI instance. That's the main idea. Let's see if it has. Okay, I'll just simply create this. Okay, and here it allows me a creation of a particular record, and I can say, let's just say Sumit. Okay, and here I'll just say SAP technical, and I can just either keep it in draft, or if I want, I can save this as well. But these are persisted data this time. Okay, so if I see over here, at this point in time, the server just connected, it created a V2 rewrite proxy rule, and now it is not connected to in-memory database. So you would be recalling when I used to write CDS watch, it used to connect to my in-memory database. Instead, now it is connected to DB called HANA. It has got some unique identity for your database ID driver and everything that it needs in order for your database to be identified. Okay. So this is what we ideally call it as a database configuration. As you can see, these are quite open during your local execution. While you connect it to the real one, while you deploy it, you will also see where this configuration are ideally stored. Because at any point in time, even though you connect it via local or you run it, it needs some user, it needs some credential to push those data onto the DB. Okay, so that's something we'll see where and how we can view those. Okay, so but now what we understood is that we have this particular thing which was running and we were able to connect to this. Even if you rerun this, you won't see the data going away like we had it in the in-memory database because it has persisted onto the HANA DB. Okay, that's the main idea. Now, as we have these things, as we have the database and everything in place, one thing we should be focusing on is how we can make sure that this application is available to the world outside. Okay, I would like to connect this particular project, or I can say I would like to deploy this project to the BTP environment so it can be consumed. Okay, or I can say I can create a Fury app on top of it. I can consume the data if I would like to somewhere else. I can do all those things. Okay, and there comes the concept of CAP service deployment. What does it say? That if I am willing to deploy some CAP service, okay, deploy some sort of a CAP service over here, then we should be knowing how CAP or internally BTP deploys the service. Okay, so there is a concept that you would have heard called microservice. Now there is a time maybe we can discuss onto the microservice. Okay, now let's just say what is a microservice in a nutshell. So, and when we are saying microservice, what is opposite of it? Okay, because if you are saying BTP is following microservice, was there any other deployment strategy? Was there any other delivery strategy which any other, let's just say, SAP's development artifact used to follow? I can say yes. Earlier there used to be something called monolith strategy, monolithic approach or monolithic strategy, whatever you call it as, what it is. Okay, so the idea is simple. When you are saying that I would like to create a big application, for example, I'll say I would like to create something which is giving me a website like let's just say OLX. Okay, consider I would like to develop a website like OLX where there can be different modules, right? So there can be a module where my user will log in so that I know which is the user who is trying to do some post, because OLX is a kind of a website where ideally you do the posting when you would like to sell something. The one which you have used, a used item, kind of when you want to sell, you will do that. So I'll just say I would like to have some user login module over here. That's fine. On top of a user login, I would also like to have some area where I can post the ads, right? So definitely if I'm posting the ads, there needs to be some data source which ideally stores that. So I'll just simply divide it by the functionality. So I'll just simply say, I would like to have some module where my ads can be posted. I can say some sort of a user module because my end user is the one who is posting this. There can be some admin module to this as well. Okay, so there can be some admin module who is using this particular ads, monitoring those whether they are following the certain compliances guidelines. So I can say some admin modules will also be there, which has got its own set of functions. Upon ad posting, I can also ensure that some sort of a notification is going on. Okay, so this notification I can consider it as a mail notification, or I can say SMS, anything you can think of, any notification framework. After that, maybe when my user is online, my let's just a person, a buyer and seller, both are online. I would like both of them to be able to communicate to each other. So some sort of a chat facility uh, I would like to provide, right? So these are the thing which ideally builds my whole application technically, right? So now if I say that I have done some change in my user login module. Earlier, I was allowing someone to just pass user ID and password. They were able to log in. This time, what I want is on top of a user ID and password that they are entering, they are also supposed to add some sort of a OTP that will get generated on their mobile. They have to pass that. Only then they'll be able to log in. Now consider that the version one of my application is already running on my production, right? And this application is live, my website is live. Just for the sake of, let's just say, deploying this particular module, should I bring down my whole application? So the idea is, if let's just go with a monolith approach. When you say monolith approach, what you can visualize is there can be one single project which will have one single, let's just say, active instance of it. Active instance is nothing but you can think of a active service. Active instance is nothing but you can think of a some sort of a service being deployed in technicality, or I can say in a term called a container, which will be a single container which will contain whole applications running instance, the binary of your project. It will contain this. So tomorrow, let's just say if you are saying that I would like to deploy my user logins version 2 because I did some change, right? At that point in time, this container will be updated. During the updated for a second or a millisecond, or let's just say for a minute, this container will be down. It will restart itself. But just even though I just did the change in my user login, I can see that my other facility, if some user is having a communication with buyer and uh, seller are having some communication, there was some mail communication which was just supposed to get triggered. Some ads are being posted. Someone just click on post. Admin modules, some admin was working. Everything will be down for that particular duration, 1 minute, right? And that would be a bit difficult thing because my whole project is deployed onto one single container over here. Rather, let's just consider, so this is what we can call it as a monolith approach. Everything is contained in a single technical running instance. Okay, and that's the reason. And the reason behind that was also quite simple. That the things were never developed in a different different object. They were developed in a way that there was a single project who was having everything that they need, right? And that's the reason this was the issue. Now, what we can also see is that there is option two for that. The option two for this is this particular functionality. If you see, I have a user login module. Currently, it's being used in one website. I can say that I can have a user login module required in different n number of application. I could have defined this, or I can say develop this generically, right? And I could have just plugged it into my application. There can be some mail communication notification module somewhere else as well. I can define it generically and I can just plug it over here. Same goes with chat facility. Anything that can be generalized possibly can be defined in a plug and play way. The one which cannot be generalized can also be defined in a way that they build or generates its own set of a module. They generate its own set of a service over here. Okay. So tomorrow, let's just say the moment I say that I'm deploying this particular project over here in my production, but now I would like to follow the microservice approach. What the system would do is, if I say your project is working, your project won't only have one running instance. It will have one running instance for your login. It will have one running instance for your mail notification, and likewise for the other as well. Okay. So the moment you say I am trying to deploy this particular service somewhere, this particular service is something that needs to be updated, not any other of them. Okay. So it means each of the development over here, if we can make it in a way that while deploying, they do not only generate one service, instead they just generate individual services for individual blocks. These individual blocks are called modules. Okay, so if they generate individual blocks for individual modules, then if you change one thing in one, other things will be unimpacted. Okay, and I can easily do the migration. I can easily do the changes, and still my user will not be impacted. So called almost zero downtime deployment. You can think it is of zero downtime deployment, so that your application will not be down at any point in time. Why? Because even if you are saying user login, which is getting changed, it means someone who is logging in at that point in time might also be impacted. But BTP has got the capability saying the moment you say your user is being logged in, this particular container which would be there, which is running with old set of code, will create its own set of a replica over here. Okay, and this particular replica will contain the old running instance, and it will keep on running a kind of let's just say version 2, or let's just say old version will keep on running, and it will update another copy of it. So next time when usage of this particular container, or I can say this particular old version is zero, no one is using that, it will easily switch the running instance, or I can say active instance, from this one. I can say from this one, it will turn into red, and this will turn into green. This will ultimately uh, make this container, make this service up. So at any point in time, your user never feel as if it's down. This is something which BTP does internally, but the idea is that earlier the a whole set of let's just a module pool, whole set of a report and everything that we used to develop, which used to go in a single running instance, because of which while migrating it to production, what we used to think, let's just migrate it over the weekend during the time when no one is using. Otherwise, they'll get an error saying objects are under activation. They might start getting some dump for some fraction of time whenever they are being used, right? In order for us to avoid all those things, the things has been divided in a way that individual things are now being generated in the form of a microservice. Okay, it also gives us an advantage that at any point in time, all the users won't be impacted if there are any technical issues in any of the modules. Rest things will still keep on working. Okay. So the idea is that while you are deploying, you should also follow that deployment strategy, which considers that individual things are deployed as a services, as a microservices. So for example, here I have a database module, here I have a service module. So I could have deployed it in a way that it just deployed one service called BTP BE employee. That's a service which contains its database, which contains its service. But that's not the suggestible way to go for. Rather, what I should be doing is I should be deploying it in a way that uh, it should be deployed as a two different services. Okay, how that can be done? Let's just say I would like to deploy this. So deployment ideally has got certain steps. Okay, so the deployment step says you should be specifying a develop deployment artifact. Okay, the deployment artifact is ideally called MTA or many a time you might also heard it as a manifest.yml. There are two options for that. Ideally, whenever you are willing that your application should be runnable on different target environment, you can go with multi-target. It says multi-target application. Okay, so I'll just simply say CDS add MTA. The moment you say CDS add MTA, it will create a file called MTA.yml. I'll click on this, and as you can see, it created certain thing, but it created in a modularized way. It created a module for service. Okay, it created a module for service which says, okay, this is a service which is going to serve the purpose of communicating to this particular endpoint. But your individual database over here has got another service. Okay, it has got a database module over here which says this is my DB module. This is what is the type of that particular module, and this is a name of it that you can think of. That's how it is going to get deployed. Okay, and in order for anything to work, it needs some resources, right? So MT file contains two segments always. Okay, now there is a segment which is just the introduction segment. You can say how the deployment should work, what all dependencies should be loaded and all. But when you talk about an application, there are two segments ideally. one called module. Okay. Modules ideally says what all microservices it should generate. It should generate a service file of it. It should create a separate running service for your service file. The name of it is going to be BTP BEMP-SRV. You can change it to anything, ensuring that it is unique. Okay. Plus, there is this database module over here has been named as a BTP BEMP DB deployer. Okay, this is also going to be one service will be available in some time in the running service instances in this particular with the name called this one. Now these two services will communicate to each other, but still they can exist independently. Now for both of them to exist, for example, I would like my DB database to work. Okay, so why I'm saying they should exist in independently, because consider that currently I have one CAP application which I am thinking of, right? I am thinking of one CAP application which is saying that I have a database tables and I have a service which should be queried. But let's just say my service is under maintenance. I am working on something which and I have saying that okay, this service is no longer to be used. But let's just say I am creating some another API, I am creating some another CAP app which needs the data from these database tables, right? So in that case, this should be reachable, right? In that case, this particular database table should be reachable, and that's the reason it never creates the thing which are required or which are reusable by multiple projects in a form of a service. Instead, it creates a container for it. Okay, and that's the reason you will say that it has created a resource for your database. It says for your database to work, it will need a resource. All your data will be dumped over here in your HANA database. So these are resource, which is nothing but your HANA database container, which will get created. And this ultimately will contain all your tables and everything. And this is just a service of it. Okay. You are trying to serve the database over here, which are stored in this resource by means of this particular service. So it is just going to connect to this. So this resource is going to exist no matter whether my both the services are up or down. Okay, but whenever this service is up, it's going to redirect its call from this particular service instance to this resource. So this resource contains the actual data, and this for this service to work, it needs something. So that's the reason it says requires. So there are two things. First, let's just go in a flashback. These are thing how the things should be deployed, what all dependency it will load, and all the things. Plus, my project contain modules. Modules, it will contain one thing that can communicate directly to my service. It can contain one module which can communicate directly to my DB folder. Okay, Jan DB. There are two things. Okay. Now for both of them to work, let's just focus on this one for the very first time. It says for this one to work, it requires a resource, and this resource name is this. So this resource should be up and running in order for this to work. Okay, it does not generate any output as such, but when you go over here, it says that this particular service, in order for it to also serve the data, its views are anyway also part of this particular container, isn't it? And that's the reason it also requires your database module to be available. That's the reason it says requires. While it is running, if it runs successfully, it provides an endpoint called SRV API. That's the reason it says provides. So requires is something that it needs for the execution. Provides is the one which it says I'll generate this if I'm able to run. Okay, it's required for the consumer of CAP service. For example, as you can see, whatever is the thing which ideally consumes your CAP service, this is the one where you will use it. So we are going to understand the concept of app router. We'll see where it is being used. So wherever you are consuming this service, it will need the things which are being generated in the form of this provides. Okay, these are the things that we should be knowing. So ultimately, it's even though this is a single project, the deployment will make it in a two projects. So tomorrow, let's just say if you're doing any changes in your data model, it won't restart your service. Instead, it will only change the relevant thing and it will restart the DB deployer in a nicer way so that I can say it will restart it gracefully so that your project is never going to get down. Okay. Now, once you have this, the idea is that outcome of this is going to be, it's going to generate two service, which you should be able to see somewhere over here in the BTP overview in the service instances. As you can see over here, we should be able to see one running instance. That's one. Plus another one is this data container. So in the cloud central that we were looking at, the database explorer should start showing this container as well. This is the main idea, right? Now let's just proceed towards the deployment that I would like to deploy the things. Let me tell you, this deployment is going to fail. Okay. Why? Because we have just fine-tuned or prepared one of the module called database module. So your DB module, it's in a shape that can be deployed. But how about your SRV module? Your service module contains endpoint, but BTP is very famous for one thing, or I can say SAP at any point in time is famous for one thing called security. Okay, so any of your services which are not secured ideally should not be accessible by anyone. That's the reason you might see the things failing, okay, because of the missing security. We'll see how the things can fail and how we can make those things right. What are the things that we need to learn in order for us to understand that how the service and security can be implemented. So it's a long journey. We'll discuss maybe on the way out. I'll just simply try to deploy the thing so that at least my database module, if it is in a better shape, it should get deployed. We should be able to see the outcome of it. Okay. So first, we should be proceeding towards the deployment. For that, let's just do that. As you can see, it says before everything, let's just install the dependency. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just simply go ahead and in a cleaner way, I'll just simply say, please install all the dependency that you will need. For that, you have to write npm install. It will verify what all packages I'll need. It will install this. So these are steps for your manual deployment. Okay, we are discussing during the first session, there can be different ways the things can be deployed, either manual or automated, right? So these are way of manual deployment. During your automated deployment, you will write all this command over there so that these things also work at that point in time. But as we are doing it manually, you should be doing this in a way that can work. Once you do that, you have to ultimately build these projects. So there are two ways. I'll just simply say right click over here and build the project. The moment you build the project over here, it will trigger some command. As you can see, it says MBT build, right? MBT build, and it is giving the project over here. It is building it. So it is generating all its component and it is packaging it in some sort of archive file that can be deployed. So it's generating some temporary make file over here, which will be clubbed then into archive file. As you can see, a folder just got generated called empty archive over here. It just generated this one and deleted the temporary intermediate file that just was generated. Internally, what it did, internally, it just figured out, okay, what all modules your project contain. It triggered a build on top of it. It says building the project. After building, it generated the component. Those all the components were clubbed and compressed, a kind of a zip file, same way archive file in project called mtar. Okay, and those particular project is available now in this one. Now this is the one that you should be deploying. The moment you deploy, you should be seeing that system will try, or I can say attempt deployment of your both the modules, a database module and your service module over here. Okay, so I'll just simply say right click over here and I'll just try to deploy this. Okay, so it tries to deploy this. While deploying, it goes service by service. It says, okay, what is the first thing I'll need? It says both the things says I need a resource. So let's just build the resource first. That's the reason you will say it will first create a resource, because once the resource is up and running, then only your service can anyway work, right? So your resource is being built. Once your resource is up and running, you would say that it is now going to go with a DB deployer, then it will go with service, it will go one by one. So now the resource is under creation. Meanwhile, just guys, give me a minute, okay? Okay, so as we can see, it just created the resource. Now it is trying to create the service module of it. Okay, it's trying to create the another module. Afterwards, it will try to deploy that. Okay, once it try to deploy that particular service, it should be able to see those things getting deployed correctly. So it's creating, it's uploading the image file of it. It's starting and staging the application. It means it's giving the required memory allocation to it. Once after doing that, it will finally try to deploy those things. And as you can see, it's easily going to deploy all the things individually because both are independent services. Okay. As you can see, execution of deploy of this deployer did not generated any error. Now it's trying to start your service over here. Okay, as you can see, the service module over here just failed during the deployment. Okay, now what could be the reason for that? Okay, so as we know, if you are in ABAP, if certain things fails, we can just simply check the import log or let's just say dump in ST22 some sort of error log if it's a gateway service, right? But in this particular case, what all things we should be looking for? So that's something maybe we can just look for over here. Maybe let's just check that out. Okay, so in order for us to view that, I'll just simply go in my BTP account over here. I'll refresh this. Okay, and as you can see, we have got certain thing. I'll just open this, and you see there are two things: BTP BEMP service, which you see over here as a module, plus BTP BDB deployer. Now, one thing to keep, one thing you remind you that this particular deployer is a database module. Anytime your database module will always be in a stage called stopped. It will never be running. Okay, because when I say database module, it will never be invoked, or I can say it will never be running directly unless it has got a call saying, please give me this data. So anytime you view your services in your application or even in a service instance, you will simply see that your database over here is always in a stop state. Okay, it does not have to do anything with the way it was deployed. You can simply check the log whether the deployment passed or not. It seems that error starting application this SRV. So this SRV application failed somehow. So if I just click on this, what I should be able to see that I can view multiple information. It's still trying to restart the service different. It's trying to attempt. So each time service deployment will make 3 attempts before it declares that, okay, no, I cannot start this service, because it could be because of certain resources which are also available on BTP, which may not be in a right state rather than our application, right? So it attempted it 3 times, but it failed somehow. So if I just go over here, it now says the status is error. So what was the reason? I can simply go in log over here. And here you see that it shows either all instances. If you would like to view error, you can search for the error as well. For example, if I search for error, it says that, okay, I cannot find a module called passport. So there are certain modules called passport, access security, which are required for your security aspect to work, for your application security aspect to work. That's the reason we call it as a security module. That's the reason which I mentioned right earlier, saying your service should be secured enough in order for it to be deployed. Till the time it's not, your deployment won't pass. So we are going to discuss this, but let's just say, how is my DB module doing? Because my DB deployed correctly, right? So I was able to see that execution of this task was correct. Plus the resource of the DB creation also was successful. I never got any error on this. Okay, let's just go over here. I'll just simply go in dev. Again, we'll open this DB deployer over here. It says that this particular is not in error. It is waiting for any call to be dispatched on top of it. As you can see, there is something called service binding. Okay, now I hope you recall the things I was discussing maybe some time back, that there are certain service binding which says that, okay, how my database communication will work. It was able to connect to your DB via certain certificates and all over here. If I just go in this particular container, you see show sensitive data. It says that, okay, there are certain database relevant user, password, port, JDBC driver, all the things are available using which your database can be communicated. Otherwise, it cannot be. So it has generated its relevant component. Now, let's just say I would like to open my database. So here I have got my HANA Cloud Central. Okay. And as we can see, the moment I click on this, I should be able to view I should be able to view the HANA Database Explorer. It should be in running state. I should be able to view this. I'll open this. Okay, and now as we can see, we see all the database, or we see the central DB instance that we created maybe while configuring the database yesterday. I would like to view the container. Now, when I say I would like to view the container, what all thing I am expecting? I am expecting that all the thing that this DB module is capable of generating. The tables, these two tables, the draft version of it, the service view of it, those all things I am expecting to be there, right? For that, what I have to do is I have to add a container. I'll click on plus over here, and I am looking for some sort of a container. I can view a container over here. Now I can add all those things individually as well. There are two ways. Either you can add all those things individually via this one. Just look at the thing. It will ask for saying host. What is a host that has been specified and all those things. Okay, like I have a host, I have a port, I have a driver, and all those things that you see over here. Otherwise, just copy this JSON, click on apply from JSON string, paste it over here, and just say apply. What do you want it? No, what do you want to call it as? So, for example, I would like to call it as anything. You can call it anything because that's just the name, display name that you will be able to see. No one other than you will be able to do that. I'll just click on this, and as you can see, it just opened something. I'll open this, and here you see it says tables. So what did it created? It created two tables. It says EMP underscore APP employee. Why? Because that was the name that we uh, gave when we created this particular project. EMP APP was the namespace. Employee, it has also got a department. As the draft capability is also enabled, in order for the draft also to be saved for which service we enable the draft? Only for employee endpoint, right? That's the reason you will see a temporary draft table, which will also serve the purpose of a draft data storage. In the view, you will see everything that needs to be served. So for this employees, the naming convention should be employee service underscore employees, employee service underscore employee, and the department plus the draft data. These are the things that you will ideally see. If I click on this, sorry, maybe department or employee over here, you should be able to view the columns that we defined, and I should be able to click on open to see how the things are going to be. Now, the data that we created at that point in time while running was a local execution, kind of a local data. You cannot expect that data to be available over here unless you create it. Okay, so for example, I would like to connect to my that particular DB. I'll just click on this and I'll just unbind this. Okay, and I'll simply say I would like to bind a DB instance, but which DB instance? I'll say, can you bind to this one? Because this now just got deployed, which is more specific to this project. I'll click on this. Okay, so system just ultimately connected my DB over here. Now I can simply go ahead and run this. Let me just open this. Let's see how it behaves. So this is just a DB. Your service is still not working because of the security thing. That's something we are anyway going to work on. Okay, so we can see that, okay, the things are still empty. I'll just go over here and I'll click on create and I'll just simply say, can I create an employee with name Sumit? And I'll just say SAP technical. Okay, and I'll save this. Okay, okay, or maybe I'll just simply go back over here one step because I would like to, let's just say, keep the draft. Okay, so I have kept the draft. I'll just go in my database container and I'll say I had a table which was for the draft one and it says employees draft. Open this. You see a draft being created over here because I created that particular draft entry over there. I'll click on this and I'll say, please create this database. Please create this data. I'll refresh this and I see draft just got cleared. But if I just say my employee, that just got created over here. So I can now see that my real container is created. I am able to create a entry into my database. All these things are happening because I am connected to the right container. My container over here is nothing but my DB, even though my service is not up, but my individual resource is up. So that particular service is bound to run. As it's a microservice approach, your other service availability does not ideally hamper the working mechanism of other resources, other service. That's what we ideally call microservice approach as. This is how your container was created. As I mentioned, it contains table, view, trigger, task, synonym, procedure, function, everything that it needs will be part of your this particular database container or the schema. That's the idea. So are we all clear till now? Anyone having any doubt or any confusion, maybe please feel free to speak up. No, yes. Are we all good? Any doubt?
Yeah, hi Sumit, Abhijit here.
Yeah, Abhijit.
Yeah, yeah, like I am a like SAP UFI developer. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have to develop like UFI code also here.
Not really. So look, when I say you are working on a cap, you are ideally working on backend service creation. That's what ideally CAP is capable of doing. On top of it, uh, it helps you create certain things. So for example, if you would like, you can add certain annotations, for example, like we did over here. Okay. On top of it, if you would like to create a UI5 service that will become part of your APP folder over here. Okay. And this particular APP folder over here is the one that we'll use. Okay. So whenever you create a service, whenever you create a UI5 project by consuming this particular service, there is a APP folder where you can see those particular things being placed. Okay, so that's the one we'll see as a part of maybe our session number 7 or 8, where we'll be creating a Fiori service. Yeah, we won't be going with a freestyle, but you can follow the same approach for the freestyle. Uh, in a nutshell, your UFI project creation will be same. It will consume as if it's consuming any other OData service, because if you look at the CAP, the purpose of it is only to create an OData service, but it has this particular APP folder to visualize how the application and everything can be combined, or I can say will be working in conjunction with each other. That's the main idea. Okay. Okay, then maybe I guess it seems we all are clear. But I'll suggest please try to do hands-on on this, so then it would be more clear. Okay, so I'll just stop this execution for now. Now the idea is we have got two things, right? We have got couple of things. As we have started on the database, we'll continue on the database path right now. So the idea is over here. Look, we have created a CAP project which has got a database module, which is a DB module over here. Now consider a scenario. Okay, a scenario which I'm talking about over here, which says that I have let me just go over here. That would be more clear then. I'll simply say that I have created a CAP project right now. Okay, I have created a CAP project over here, which contains a DB and SRV, a service module, right? And all these things are connected to each other, as in all these things are combined. And let's just say I can see that these things are uh, in a single project. Tomorrow, let's just say there is another CAP project which is coming up. The one CAP project which we created right now over here, the purpose of it was to, let's just say, create employee data. I can say manage employees, right? When we were managing the employees, there can be another one. Just a minute, guys. Just give me. Sorry for that. Sorry, guys. Okay, yeah. So for example, we have created one CAP project which was having a database, which was having a service, and now the things are working fine. But it was manage employees. I am creating an employee. Tomorrow I might enter it with so many different information. It might contain a huge amount of database. Okay. Now this database can be used for different purposes. I can plan to create another CAP service whose purpose is to create a Fiori application whose purpose is to just display employees. Right, that can be one. Okay, or I can also plan to create another employee call, let's just say some sort of analytical page application for my employees, some sort of a dashboard for my employees, right? But when I say I'm creating another application which can display my employee, definitely I'll be referring to the same central DB onto which I would have entered the database, onto which I would have created a database, right? Created some sort of a data just to display the employee. definitely I won't ask my user to again go ahead and add the data because it's a separate database container. That's not how it should be. It does not look good. Plus, it would be a dual maintenance, and the data consistency will also be voided, right? So, in that particular case, what we need a way, to figure out how we can split the particular application in a way that the things can be made more reusable. Okay, so if rather than creating an application like this, which can have a DB which was specific to CAP application, if I can create an application which contains a centralized database over here, right, which contains a centralized database over here, I can say central DB. Okay, and after having a central DB, if I can create a CAP project over here, for example, one CAP project, another CAP project, another CAP project over here, which definitely will contain its own set of a module. So I can have one CAP project over here, which will contain its own set of a database container, and it will have its own set of a service. Same goes for the other one. I can have it n number of time, right? So I can have my DB HDA container for three different projects, and the purpose of it can also be different, right? But the work this application will be doing, for example, this CAP application will be to create an employee. So the moment it create an employee, it will dump that data into this particular database, right? So that's where it will dump the data. Now, once the data has been dumped over here, if I'm having another application over here whose purpose is just to display the data, right? Display employee, all it has to do is it has to just connect to this particular container, which is a central one, which is exposing those data, or I can say which is containing that data. If I have another application whose purpose is to create some sort of a dashboard out of it, it can also easily connect to this particular centralized database container. The one thing is quite clear. Once I say I am creating a CAP project, it will have the HDA container for sure. Okay, I'll create a dedicated HDA container for it. But the HDA container over here, the one which we just looked at, as you can see, where it's open. Okay, yeah, here in the Database Explorer, we see that it contains so-called it contains so-called synonyms. This synonyms purpose is to uh, ultimately connect to any remote database and show those artifacts as if it's part of its own container, right? So if I can create some central DB and connect it from all the CAP service I want, all the data will be created centrally, or the data will be queried centrally. So individual CAP project, if I am, let's just say, as a part of restructuring tomorrow, I'm scrapping my one project, my data won't be at loss. Plus, it improves the chances of reusability, right? So the idea is we would be designing our project rather than in a way where it contains all the data in a particular container which is specific to CAP project. Will create a centralized database store, and that particular central DB will be communicating just to serve the data. Either it can be creation purpose, updation purpose, or just for a querying purpose as well. Okay, that's the main idea. So we created a service which definitely, thanks to BTP, is being deployed in the form of a microservice, but still we would like to enhance it more. We would like to define it better in the form of architectural way. So while it's being used in a neat and clean way. So the scalability of my application is not at risk. Okay, that's the main idea. In order for us to do that, what we'll do is, as we are proceeding towards the DB, proceeding with the database connection, proceeding with the database activity, we'll simply go ahead and create another project which is just for the database. So here, as we can see, I am having a CAP project which was meant for a database and the service. Right now, I would like to create a project which is not meant for a, let's just say, service and database. It was just meant, or it should be just there for the database creation. For that, what we can do is you can just simply go ahead over here, new, and you can just simply say, I would like to create a new project from template. Okay, and here you can create a another project over here. Okay, so maybe we have not got the required extensions over here. It's basic MTA application, but we would need a SAP HANA database. Okay, so let's just clean this up, and maybe let's just try to open the data container. So what we did is when we created a a dev space, we created it in a flavor which allows us creation of a project with certain flavors, thanks to the extension that we selected, right? And those extension are not capable of generating the HANA database that we are looking for. So what we'll do, I'll click on this BAS over here. Okay, so I have got a CAP dev space. We created it with the full stack cloud application, but we need certain extensions so that it's also capable of generating the database projects. So what I'll do is, for time being, I'll just stop my project over here so I can edit the extensions. Okay, and what are we looking at? So I'll just simply click on create. I am looking to create a HANA database. Okay, so as you can see, it should be able to create a basic tools. So this is the one that we created, right? The one which we created had also given me an option whether you would like to have a HANA tools which you can create HANA XSA project and all. But we never selected this because we never thought of we'll need it. There is a particular type of a dev space which contains the required extension in order for us to create those particular HANA project, HANA calculation view, HANA database explorer, HANA tools. Okay, and these are the one which we'll need. So here we see HANA calculation view, performance, HANA tool, all these things we'll need. So what I'll do is I have two options. Either I can create just one dev space over here where I'll say HANA DB, or I can say basic HANA project. That's one. Or if I want, I can also go ahead and uh, extend my current dev space, which was over here, and I can simply go ahead and edit this. And I can simply say on top of it, I would need some extra extensions. So for time being, let's just also add all the one which are available. But we are looking for mainly SAP HANA relevant extension. Okay, so these are the one that we are looking for. I'll just add those extension over here. Let's see whether it start giving us the option that we are looking for. We are looking for an option where we can create a project which can help us with the creation of a just a HANA database module. A central HANA DB is also one kind of a project which just contain your database. And that's the one that we are planning to use. So I just stopped, change the extension. I am just restarting my workspace, and let's see now what are the possible options that we start getting over here. Okay, I'll just open this. Okay, and now let's just try to see if what are the options that we are getting. I'll just say new project from template. Okay, it's activating certain extensions. We are still not getting the option that we were looking for. This won't anyway help. Okay, so maybe this particular project over here has only give us the adaptation for the UI adaptation project, CAP project, and the one. No, maybe let's just go back then. Okay, so let's just say basic HANA DB. Maybe I guess it's not giving us the required basic tool that we need because I guess that was not part of it. Let's see, maybe I guess we'll go ahead and create just a HANA native application. Using HANA native application along with those extensions that we selected, you can also create a CAP app. We choose full stack cloud application because on top of a CAP, if you would also like to create some sort of a UI flavor, Fiori application, then that's something that this full stack cloud application gives you. This basic HANA won't give you that particular option. That's the reason we ideally choose the basic, we choose the full stack cloud application over this one. But you can, for the DB creation, you can still go ahead with this one. Okay, so it is running. Let's just say click on this one. Okay, I'll just click on OK. Okay, let's see. We can create a new project. Okay, now you see SAP HANA database project. That's the one that we were looking for. Okay, so this SAP HANA database project is the one that ideally gives you an option to create a centralized database. I'll just go next over here. And you can give it any name that ideally helps you with the project creation, or I can say some logical centralized DB name. So for example, I'll just simply say BTP DB for my employees. Okay, we can do that. And I'll just click on next. Okay, now after doing that, what we'll need is we would be prompted for certain database module name. You can keep it as a DB, you can change it to anything you want. We'll keep it as this one that has been suggested. One thing you would have observed is that unlike in CAP project where we had two modules, here we have just one module that's also DB. That's just a database module. It does not have anything else. Okay, I'll just click on next. Now it has asked you for certain namespace and the schema. Okay, namespace is the one maybe you would have seen all the tables initials will change the way you let's just say select this one, right? So that's one of the option which you ideally get when you add a namespace, but that's not required when you are creating a central DB. Plus the schema name over here. Let's just understand that. So for example, if I open any of the table that I have created till now, right? So here I can see BTP this EMP APP employee has got a schema name. As you can see, it's quite arbitrary. During the deployment, it just generated a schema name which was kind of not defined. So let's just say if I'm deploying this in another environment, my schema name will change. Okay, as this is not a central DB, it might not concern me much. Okay, but when I say I'm creating something which is supposed to be used at different places, right? So how I can uniquely identify a table. I can have an employee table in one particular database, in another centralized database, I can also have an employee. If I would like to consume both, how would I be able to uniquely identify them? You can do that by using a schema and the table name combination. That's the reason the schema name you can give static. If you don't give a static schema name, it will generate a random schema name at its own. Okay, so I'll just say BTP DB, for example, let's just call it as an employee. So I'm just generating a schema name whose name is BTP DB employee. I'm going to, let's just say, uh, create a centralized HANA DB version over here. Okay, so that's going to get deployed where? That should be deployed ideally on my SAP HANA cloud. That's the main idea that we should be having. Now, after doing that, what we should also think is whether we'll need a running instance of it or not. Okay, whether you would like to bind this into a running service cloud instance, you have an option. As you can see, if you click on help, it will say that if you choose the yes, this will bind the newly created instance into the service instance into the runtime target environment. But as we are going to do this during the deployment, we'll ideally choose a no and we'll go ahead with that. So I'll just simply say finish and it should generate me a project. Okay, that particular project is nothing but the database project, which will contain all the centralized database, or I can say all the centralized data going forward. Okay. Now here the language also change a bit. Okay, so if I say uh, I'm just expanding this, I just got a DB folder. Plus, it's also ready for the deployment. It gave me an empty YML file which contains just the DB module. I can go ahead and rename this name of it so it makes more sense. So for example, I can simply say this is my BTP DB employee. I'll just say BTP DB employee. This is the one. And as these are resource, if I'm changing the name of resource, the place where it is being used will also change. So I'll just simply paste this over here. Okay. Plus, if you want, you can also change the name of this particular service, the module name with which it is going to get deployed. So I'll just simply say BTP DB employee, maybe central. I'll just name it as a underscore C. Okay. So this how it is also going to get deployed. Currently, it does not have anything. Currently, it does not have anything which can be used for the deployment purpose. Okay, but the deployment artifacts are still ready that can be used for the deployment. Okay, now what we'll need? We will need certain thing. We'll need to define the artifact that we would like to make reusable. So for example, in this particular case, I can say I would need certain tables. I would need certain tables. So for example, I can say, let's just go with an employee table for now. Okay. Once employee table has been defined, my question will be, if I am the one who is defining a centralized database, should I give the access to my database table directly, or I should create just a view onto which I should provide the access? So tomorrow, let's just say if I'm extending my table, I'm doing something, my actual user who is going to consume the service are not impacted first. Second, my data will be more secured because it's not directly access onto the table, rather it's just a view, a window out of which they are viewing that. So I might also need a view created on top of it. Okay, that's one. Plus, I can have different user, right? For example, I have a user who is going to create an employee. It means they might need some sort of a write access on my database. There can be some user who is just there to either create a display application or just a dashboard where the application can also be displayed. So some sort of a read-only roles may also come into picture when you are saying that I am creating a centralized DB. What all kind of access I can expect on my DB? Okay, all these things are ideally contained in the form of a role. Okay, so these are the things we can expect when we create a centralized DB. We have to create tables, we have to create a view, plus we have to create a role. Okay, now we are creating HANA database. Earlier, we were working on CAP projects. When you create a HANA database, what we know is we have to focus on a HANA artifact. For example, when we created a HANA database table, the extension of it was during the build HDB table. The extension of my view was .hdb view, right? So these were the extension that system generated while you build the project. These are the ones that we have to develop natively right now. Okay. Plus, on top of it, the roles that we are also going to create, we have to give it a name called with an extension called HDB role. Okay, that's one important thing we should all be focusing on. Okay, so now the idea is if I am willing to create certain thing, this SRC is the folder that I'll use for that. Okay, this SRC is the folder that I'll use for that purpose where I'll dump all this thing which I am looking for. Okay, so for example, I'll say I would like to create some table. Let me just create a folder for tables. If I'm trying to create some, let's just say views, let me just create some folder which contains my views. And if I am willing to create certain roles, let me just also create certain folder which contains the roles as well. So I created certain folders and within which I'll create the relevant artifact. What will come first? Definitely the table. I have to create my table very first. So what I'll do is I'll just simply say I would like to create a file. Okay. And this particular file which I'm going to create, I can name it as anything. I'll just simply say my employees.hdb table. So it gives me an idea or it gives me an option to create a table. But when you are working on a CAP, you are using CDS language. When you are working on HANA, you have to use a language SQL script, a HANA language. Okay. In HANA, what is a kind of table we ideally create? Some column table. So you will see the moment you start typing C, it will say column table you would like to create. If you would like to club it in a individual name, you can simply say, I would like to create a BTP tables with the name btp.t underscore t, and I'll just simply call it as employees. Okay, and I'll just simply add this over here. Okay, and I'll create certain columns. So for example, I would like to create a column for ID. Okay, uh, which will contain the ID of it. I'll just simply say there can be n number of database. Either there can be n varchar which contains character. There can be integer. There can be date time. Okay, all those things are possible. For ID, I'll choose character. So I'll just simply say n varchar 36. Okay. Um, Another thing maybe we would need is what are the things it contains. So let me just have a look at this. It says that it contains another. Okay, as you can see here, we are having an idea of like what all column we'll need. So we can directly pick this. Tomorrow we can plan to change this employee with a remote table, or I can say a remote table connection rather than creating our own is a part of a CAP table, right? So I'll just simply say name and I would need it as a nvarchar 255. So we are trying to make this database even central. Now I would like to make this email ID also available over here in nvarchar 255. And maybe a department, let's just say. Okay, and maybe let's just say I would like to have all these 4 columns as well. Created at, created by. You can, if you want, you can opt out of any of the column if you do not need that. All we are doing is we are just creating a table which contains the column that we ideally look for. Okay, and now we are saying okay, after doing that, you have to specify certain things. So for example, you have to specify saying that this particular table, all the database constant you can apply. For example, certain things should be unique, certain things should be not. What is a primary key? Okay, you can specify all this thing as well. So I'll just simply say primary key of this is nothing but ID. If there are more than one, you can specify them separated by comma as well. So I created a table over here. Okay, and my table has now been placed in a right table position. I can say in the tables folder with the extension called HDB table. Now I would like to expose this in a right way so that it can be used. So I'll just simply say I'll create a new file called v underscore employees, for example, and I'll just give it an extension called HDB view. Okay, I'll just simply say I would like to create a view over here. Maybe what will create a view as? So maybe I can say I would like to create a view as v employees, or if you would like, you can simply say BTP underscore v dot employees. I can say v underscore employees. Okay, and I'll just simply say select star, or if you would like, you can also select the columns. So I'll just say select star from, and I'll just simply add this. Okay, so I just created a table. I created a view which is going to select either all the column. If you say star, if you specify individual column, you can also do that. Okay, that's also one thing you can easily perform. Now, after doing this, now I have to define that I can have different kind of consumer for my particular project, for my central DB. I can have a person who is using it for the creation purpose, who is using it for display purpose, and these are the use cases which I know upfront. There can be certain use case which might also come up afterwards, right? So in that case, I might extending my roles as well. But for now, I can at least plan to create certain roles which are uh, quite evident, which are quite let's just say clear to me that this will definitely come up, right? So I'll just simply say new role, and let's just say for the implication that we just created, right, for the writing purpose, I'll just simply say I would like to create a write role over here, and I'll just simply name it as a HDB role. It will create a role where you will specify what all object you would like to create, what all object you would like to expose with what all privileges, right? So the name write role does not give anything. You have to specify that what are those objects which you would like to expose. So I'll just simply say text editor, and in this one I'll just say control space. It says base role structure. You can give any name, right? So for example, our project name over here is BTP DB employee, and here I'll just say it's a read, or I can say there is a write role. So I'll just simply say write. Okay, and afterwards I'll simply say that what are the privileges I would like to give. So I'll just simply say object privileges. In this object privilege, you can simply say I would like to add a new object. Okay, I just add a new object by adding a control space. What is the name of the object you are talking about? So I'll say I am talking about this particular object. Okay, so here is the one. Plus, in terms of a SQL, it's ideally in the form of a table. So I'll just simply say it's a nothing but a table kind of object. It's a view, but underlying view is going to connect to a table. That's the main idea. Now I would like to give a privilege, saying I would like to have a privilege with a write access. So when you say write, what does it mean? It says that the user should be able to perform insert, update, delete, select any of the operation, right? So I'll just simply say insert, update, delete. Okay, all this operation. Maybe on top of it, let's just also give a select operation as well. Plus, when you create a write role, it will be provided to the user, or I can say to the application which is having that particular role. Okay, that's one. Now tomorrow, let's just say, or I can say currently you are giving this access to the DB folder. Now this DB is exposing this view again in the form of a service endpoint, right? So this role also should be granted to that service so that this operation can be performed, right? It's like I am going somewhere outside. I said I am giving my key of my bike to my friend. I am saying, hey, you can use it whenever you want, but do not give it to anyone. That's what we can ideally call privileges as. That I am giving you a right to ride my bike, but do not give it to anyone. I'll say you can have my bike, and if someone asks you, if someone needs that bike, please feel free to give it to them as well. That's called privilege with grant option. That the person who is getting that privilege is also capable of passing on those privilege to anyone else as well. Okay, so we will always create two kind of a role, a role plus a role with a grant privilege. So I'll just name it as a right and a kind of a G. So just to signify that there is a role with a grant privilege. Okay, I'll add all these things that I had, plus I'll change this which says privilege with grant option, plus whenever a role is having a grant privilege, the name of it, okay, the name of it should have a hash towards the end. It says it has got additional or cascaded role capability. So this is a very important thing. This hash might make your project build fail. Okay, this is something that we should be knowing. Now, these are right role. If you would like for a display application, you would also like to prepare beforehand. You can also create certain role for display. I'll just simply say read role. And I'll open this in a text editor. Okay, and this time I'll just simply say read only. And here, as it's a read only, should I give it insert, update, delete, right? No. Whoever is the user whom I am going to give the read option should also only have a select authorization. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll just simply create a new file over here called read with grant privilege HDB role. I'll add a hash over here and I'll just simply say privilege with grant option. So at least the read privilege can be passed on to anyone wherever needed. Okay, so this is what we created. So in a way, the database that we created in the form of a CAP project, which used to sit, which used to stay in your database container, which was specific to CAP. Now we are in the process of development of a central database. This central database contain a component like table, view, role, because it has got multiple consumers. We created those. Now we should be in a position to make those things available publicly. Once that's done, we can expect that this particular container named over here should be available centrally. Then we should be in a position to consume this container over here rather than having a native table in the CAP which creates it. So that's the one that we are going to look at. Okay, so what we'll do is like we used to deploy any other app, same way we'll do it over here. I'll just simply open this in a integrated terminal. Okay, and I'll just try to first log into my CF. As I have created a new dev space. It asked me for the API endpoint. If I would have opened an existing dev space, it only is required for once. I'm not supposed to add those information multiple times. Okay, let's just copy this, paste it, allow this. Okay, I am now able to connect to this. Now I have to install all the dependencies. So I'll just simply say npm install. Okay, maybe I guess it has got the package, but if you would like to install the dependency, you have to be at the DB folder, and I'll just simply install the dependency, whichever are needed. Okay, I'll just clear this out. I'll just go back on my project folder and I'll try to build this. Okay, so it's building it. It just created a make file. It will also generate some archive file also going forward. As you can see, it's archive file just got generated. I can see the empty archive folder and I'll just right click and deploy this. So what it will do is it will create a centralized container with all those three objects, and those three objects going forward we can use for my application consumption perspective. So it's creating it just is creating a database container with the name that we mentioned. Okay, so it's binding that particular service that we created resource, because that resource is now up and running at least, right? Maybe we can also just try to view those application being deployed over here. I can just go in the application. As you can see, this underscore C is in the generation mode. Okay, it's executing the deploy on this. Okay, so this process just got finished successfully. So we have this container. Now what we can do is we can just simply open this and maybe the data container as well. Okay, over here, let's just go back and try to view the service binding of this. Open this and copy the JSON file and go over here and just simply say, I would like to add a container over here, apply the JSON connection, apply, and let's just try to name it something which makes sense for us. So for example, I'll just simply say HDI this one because there is a centralized container. Okay, and I'll click on OK. As you can see, it created a database container. I'll just be able to view the table that we created, BTP employees, plus the view that we created as well. Right? Roles will not be visible because otherwise anyone can add any role. Ideally, the owner of that particular container, or I can say developer, can pass on those roles information saying, if you would like to get the information of like how you can create those, please add these two roles. So that ideally you can get from the developer or the centralized GitHub repo of that particular database project. But these roles won't be visible when you go over here and try to view any of this particular schema information. Okay. And now the next step that we'll be performing is how I can control and consume this central DB into any of the CAP container and ensure that the database is created centrally rather than in a specific CAP application. That's the main idea. That's the next step that we'll be going towards. Thereby, we'll be learning how the CDS persistent exists keyword that we were discussing all this while, that rather than creating a table, how we can create a view. That's something we'll understood. Okay. Anyone having any doubt on any of the things we covered so far? Okay, so since we all are good.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
Krishna.
Sumit, we will practice then after
Y-
that, like we will
Yeah,
get
yeah,
any.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I guess I'll also
Yeah.
suggest please give it
Yes,
a try because the things look simple, but the moment you try working on that, you will end up in
yeah, it's
multiple errors. Out of which you will learn,
right.
right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Definitely.
So,
So
yeah,
I won't overload you guys with too much of information, but I'll suggest whatever we have tried out in this weekend, try to spend at least half an hour during the week course of weekdays, so you'll be able to replicate the same thing.
Yeah, that would be our target this week, definitely.
Yeah, that would help.
Sure, because otherwise to pick up next week, right? Yeah, we have to be at least till here. Otherwise, we lose the track definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And that's the reason I'm going just module by module. We know our service is not up and running, but let's just be clear with the database module, then we'll go with the service. If I bombard you with everything at a time, maybe you won't be able to grasp it then.
This is the base, right? Yeah, yeah. This is the base.
Exactly.
Sure.
so
Okay,
Sumit, I
then
have one question.
yeah, Krishna.
Sumit,
Yeah.
yeah. So we will develop like application scratch to end, right? In this
Mm-hmm.
training,
Yeah, we can.
or
So we will. So ultimately, the moment I created a database, we'll now ensure that our service is up and running. We'll add a set of
Mhm.
authorization on top of it. Once it's done, we'll try to create a Fiori application. We'll consume our service. We'll deploy it on the build Fiori launchpad. We'll create a tile, and we'll see that from that tile, our service is invoked. Our database container is there. it's also consuming and triggering those, let's just say, remote containers. Plus, if there are in third-party APIs, so for example, we have also plan of connecting to on-premise service as well. So these are cloud, but if you are connecting to on-premise service, how those also can be queried via our application, that's something we are also having in our plan. So whole end-to-end scenario we have anyway covered. Do not worry.
Okay. And Sumit, suppose that from this CAPM, I want to create like master detail application. Okay. Suppose that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So after this training, we are able to like create OData services for master detail application. Like,
Look, OData service anyway we'll be able to create by maybe I guess in a session, maybe next week, maybe by Sunday
Mhm.
latest, we'll be able to create a OData service. Then you can consume it
Right.
any kind of Fiori application you want, be it list
A-
report,
and
be it
yeah,
yeah, anything. Yeah,
yeah, and we can perform like CUD operation for like
yeah, yeah,
freestyle event also, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
You
okay,
can. Yeah.
okay, okay. So thank you, and we will practice, and I think we will get lots of error.
Yeah, yeah. There are too many things to learn, but I mean, just follow
Yeah.
along so you'll be able to grasp the things easily.
Yeah.
Are we going to touch anything in S4HANA or something else, Sumit? Some.
As for HANA on-premise connection, that's something maybe, look, CAP, or I can say the purpose of this whole training is to understand how the cloud natively work, plus
Okay.
what are the BTP hook points which are enabling you to connect to on-premise system if you would like to. So those all connections, so that my on-premise calls, my cloud can also trigger certain calls to on-premise system, get the data, and even if I would like to perform certain operation, be it calling a API or anything, you can do that. That's the main idea. That's the one that we are focusing on. Purpose
So,
of this is to understand what the openness of CAP, because the openness with which CAP comes up, even your rep is not capable enough of triggering your remote calls or integrating any third party. For example, Azure Storage Explorer, that's something we are also going to integrate, right? So those are the things which CAP is capable of doing, and that's something we'll be exploring.
okay.
Okay.
These ADT and all will not be using, right? I mean, the CAP.
No. So
Going-
ADT is not, maybe I guess in case of a CAP, ADT is not required. If you
not
are willing to, let's just say, view anything, whatever is an on-premise, you can view those things, or I can say you can develop your on-premise stuff via ADT and then maybe consume it as a service in CAP. That's possible. That's something we'll anyway be doing. But for
Okay.
natively for CAP development, your ADT doesn't understand Node.js, so there is no means of in using that,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Got it.
Okay, yeah, then I'll give you back your few minutes and maybe rest of the weekend. Just try to give it some time, and maybe you should also start feeling comfortable in this.
Yeah, sure, sure. Definitely will focus.
Okay, yeah. Thank you then. Thanks a lot for joining. We'll yeah, call it a day, and we'll see each other in next weekend then.
Thank you.